A political veteran, a member of the Magic Circle, Lord Janner went to his grave pursued by those who claimed he abused them as children.
You said it was black and white, didn't you? You haven't a clue, have you?
I haven't a clue.
We've spoken to a man, one of 21 alleged victims, who says in the 70s the MP came to his children's home to do magic shows, afterwards taking children upstairs to undress and wash them.
You don't get grown men undressing children and kissing them, basically taking advantage of children like that. Obviously it was touchy-feely kind of stuff.
His hands were on you and you were naked?
Yes.
And you were how old?
About 11, 12.
How did it affect you?
It's mentally scarred me for life. I can never get rid of it, but I've got to learn to live with it.
At least 9 men were to have accused Lord Janner of child abuse here at the Old Bailey this year. But it's just been confirmed that his death means the criminal proceedings can't continue. Instead, the National Child Abuse Inquiry will take on the Janner case.
I'm absolutely convinced she will hear them all in person, and I'm very hopeful that findings of fact will come out.
We've discovered evidence that Greville Janner, as Leicester MP, regularly visited the city's children's homes and one of their managers.
The Beeches is no ordinary residential unit for difficult youngsters.
In 1981, the BBC filmed at this children's home, where the manager was Frank Beck. He promoted a technique called regression therapy. Difficult children would be treated like babies, but that allowed him to viciously abuse them. Frank Beck was a brutal and manipulative paedophile. Jailed for life in 1991, he died 3 years later.
You recognise that something's right or it's wrong.
Former detective Graham Peen reported Frank Beck in the late 70s after seeing him rubbing a boy's groin. But he was to make another visit to the Beeches.
As I walked in, sat in an armchair, was Greville Janner. Next to Greville Janner was this young boy. I thought that was a bit strange. What's an MP doing there, and what's a boy doing sitting on the arm of the chair? And he's actually been too tactile with the young boy, who was obviously in the care of the local authority. You know, to me it wasn't normal. Being a detective, you know, it was an unusual occurrence, and therefore it's something that I felt that ought to be reported.
And what happened after you put the report in?
Well, I never heard anything more about it.
A second police officer also reported his concerns, the BBC's been told. We spoke to dozens of men and women who lived and worked in the children's homes. 8 identified the MP as one of Beck's regular visitors.
Greville Janner was one of them, definitely.
How can you be sure who that man was?
Because when I was 14, 15, I saw him in the papers, leaflets.
And what did people say about Janner in the home?
They were friends. Beck and Janner were friends. You know, he came to see Beck.
Is it possible that Beck could have kept what was going on at the homes from a friend of his?
Not a close friend, no. And they were close friends.
A former official at Leicestershire Council told us when he raised concerns about Frank Beck's methods, Beck said he had Greville Janner's support. Beck used Janner's name to achieve, he said, whatever Beck wanted to achieve. Yet, during Beck's trial, he and a former children's home resident sensationally accused Greville Janner of child abuse. Responding in the Commons, the MP didn't mention his visits to children's homes, but he did say this.
There was, of course, not a shred of truth in any of the allegations of criminal conduct made against me during the trial by Beck.
But there is now a thick file of allegations against the late Lord Janner. We understand at least 20 men and 1 woman have accused him. 12 at least are former residents of children's homes. 1 says he was forced to have sex with Greville Janner while staying overnight at a different home. There are claims of sexual abuse at locations including a school, a former swimming pool at this Leicester hotel, even the House of Commons. Prosecutors are understood to regard the allegations as serious and the evidence overwhelming. It stands in stark contrast to Lord Janner's public service, including work to remember the victims of Nazi death camps and decades as an MP. His family have
alleged sexual abuse victims of Lord Janner are said to be devastated today after the case against him was formally dropped. The Old Bailey's heard prosecutors will now not go ahead with a planned trial of facts after the 87-year-old's death last month. Let's speak to Joseph Cottrey-Monson, who is director of Mary Monson Solicitors on Fleet Street. Afternoon to you, Joseph.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Just explain the legals around why this case has been dropped. You cannot prosecute a dead person, correct?
Well, that's what they say, but I'll be honest with you, Tom, there are many who feel that this is just another infuriating day for transparent justice. This influential man has even beyond the grave, it seems, managing to evade the truth being told. So, the alleged victims say. Of course, there have been let-outs and get-outs by the CPS and the police over a period of decades for which they've got no explanation. Today, you're right. A decision has been made not to proceed on the basis that the man is dead, therefore no trial can take place. But you know, in my respectful suggestion, that decision ignores not only the public outcry, and James O'Brien said some fantastic things, one of the only people brave enough to say some very good things about this, but also the legal position. It's an incomprehensible decision legally, and I'll tell you why, Tom. The case was no longer a trial of the defendant. It was a trial of the facts as soon as Janner was declared unfit to plead. While he was still alive, his role in the actual proceedings changed and became irrelevant. The tribunal of fact wouldn't have declared his guilt or otherwise. It would have given a judgment as to what happened. And, of course, that was very important for two reasons. First of all, it gave many people who claimed that they'd been abused by him in children's homes, different children's homes over a period of decades, as children, an opportunity to have their stories heard and a final acknowledgement of the truth. But go on.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there not a question to be asked about whether that is a good use of the court's time? Could that not be done somewhere else? I know that the Child Abuse Inquiry is going to pick up on it and look into it themselves. Or is that something that you think actually really should be done by the court?
Pick up on it, perhaps, but let's make no mistake. These allegations couldn't have been any more serious. A very senior, respected member at of Parliament, at the highest level of Parliament, who used that power in the allegations, not only to abuse these children, the most vulnerable children imaginable, children who couldn't escape because they were already in the care of the state, and also, if what is said is to be believed, use that influence to kibosh the police and the CPS at least 3 times, from 1991, 2007, and you know, some people have even said in 2015, although of course by then, you know, apparently he's got dementia, but there was certainly this Alison Saunders fiasco with allegations of cronyism and a backtrack under the public pressure.
To what extent then, Joseph, briefly, do you believe that this shows that the state, the establishment, whatever that might be described as, has very little appetite for really properly pursuing these kinds of cases?
I've got to be very careful, of course, about the things that I say. You know, I'm an officer of the court myself, but you know what? We like to think as criminal prosecution lawyers, and myself, I'm a criminal defence lawyer, and I actually work in this area, defending people, some of whom are wrongfully accused. We like to think that the system works, and it works fairly, even if it's not perfect. How can we claim in the context of a fiasco like this, ending in such a dissatisfactory way, how can we claim that that's the case with any real credibility?
Stinks, doesn't it? Joseph, thank you. Joseph Cottrey-Monson, director of Mary Monson Solicitors on Fleet Street. We'll, of course, bring you the latest on that story as it develops this afternoon.